this issue, you probably heard where there was a 300-page amendment that was inserted at 3 a.m. the morning before the vote. Leader Boehner went through this for about an hour on the floor. He was accused of filibustering because he was giving information. But he has the prerogative as leader to take as much time as he wishes. He only took an hour. And he was going down these, we call them bullet points, raising these issues about these green standards and so on and so forth. If I were here to tell you that you would benefit as ag producers, rather typical Nebraska ag producers, the only thing you would really benefit from is planting trees on marginal acres. Well, there are probably as many definitions of marginal acres as there are people in this room here today. And by the way, you couldn't harvest those, even so. And I have a hard time saying you're going to benefit by planting trees. That's the long and the short of it. But let me tell you a story. I was walking early that day that we took the vote on the cap and trade. I was walking back to the office from the Capitol, and an activist stopped me on the street, and very polite, but she said she was with the Union of Concerned Scientists. This is one of the very activist groups that is trying to take the Al Gore approach to scaring people into conserving energy or reducing carbon emissions, but not going for nuclear or hydropower. But I won't get to that just yet. But she said, are you going to vote for the clean energy bill that will lead to less expensive energy long term? I said, wow. So did you put it that way? No, I didn't. I said, really, I mean, that's an interesting way that you describe it, but I'm very concerned about jobs in my district. And in many different forms. I mean, yes, we are very coal-oriented with our electricity, but we also have thousands of people working for the railroad hauling coal, virtually, in North Platte, or Alliance. And I said, I'm concerned about jobs. She says, well, there are only 5,000 coal miners' jobs in the whole country. Now, I'll admit I wasn't prepared to dispute that with any specifics, but incidentally, a couple hours after that, I talked to my colleague, Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, and she told me that there's 19,600, to be specific, people on the payroll who work for coal companies just in Wyoming. That's not Illinois.
Just with the mine.
Right, just with the mines. Now that they could be miners, they could be clerical, they could be drivers, you name it. But it's all the same when it comes to the war on coal that's coming out of Washington. That doesn't include Illinois, that doesn't include Indiana, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, other very coal-intensive states. So this lady was very nice. They aren't always that way, I can tell you. But she was nice, and she mentioned the 5,000 jobs. I said, well, you know, rail jobs are what I'm concerned about in my district as well. She says, well, they can haul wind turbines instead of coal. I said, well, I'll tell them that. And every time I tell this, I get the same reaction that you just gave. It's not reality. And here we are cleaning up our coal power generation as we speak, and have been for quite some time. We already produce energy via coal much more cleanly than India and China, and yet they're exempt, obviously, from any law that we pass, but they're even exempt from the Kyoto Treaty that's aimed at getting us to virtually get rid of coal power. And yet, we don't even have friendly policies to hydropower that's absolutely carbon-free emissions, or nuclear power, which is the next closest thing. And the thing is, we could do so much better than this heavy-handed government with this clever little thing that we call market-based when it comes to cap and trade. Now, you should have seen the gnashing of teeth in Washington a year ago when corn was at $7 an hour, $7 a bushel, and crude oil was 130 bucks a barrel, and right in there. And this, how bad it was that people would speculate and look at these speculators driving up the cost. cap and trade is designed to do exactly that on purpose. That's the objective. To drive up the cost of fossil fuels via a price tag on speculating on carbon credits. And yet the same people who squawked last year when corn was at $7 a bushel are pushing cap and trade. That's ridiculous in my book, and I would imagine it is in yours too. But that's what we're facing. Healthcare. The president may say you can keep what you have if you like it. You better hope it doesn't go up 1 penny, because it will revert to the public plan as specified in the bill. If after 5 years your private plan doesn't meet certain standards, it will revert to the public plan. But you know what? The bill doesn't say what those certain standards are. Silent. That's to be decided by the 53 new councils, task forces, governing agencies, commissions, boards, you name it. To be determined. That's a great way to govern, huh? We just put TBD at the bottom of every bill and say that it's flexible. Right. So those are just some of the items that I'm concerned about, and certainly that issues that lead to my vote if we've already had a vote, such as the food safety bill. But let me say that it's not just about saying no. When it comes to health care, the very first thing we should do is make sure that all health insurance premiums are tax deductible, not just the ones you take through your employer. And that will encourage people to shop around. We don't have true competition without the ability for consumers to shop around. If we have policies that basically coerce them to go in one direction, say as through an employer, and I'm not saying it's bad to take or give benefits through an employer, but there are consequences to that, and that's less shopping around by those workers. You take a company with 500 employees, they all have the same copay, same deductible virtually. They're in 500 different financial scenarios in each and every household. Employers don't provide homes virtually or cars for their employees or pick where they live or what they drive yet. The government does that. But employers are virtually and may be mandated to choose, if there's still a choice left, in health insurance benefit, which is much more personal, much more personal decision than where to live or what you drive. So the unfortunate part is, you probably already know this, that organized labor has a little more say in Washington these days than they used to. And we're talking about a group of people that represents about 7% of the American population. And yet they have 100% control over Nancy Pelosi's agenda. That's why we haven't passed the Colombia trade agreement. That's why we haven't passed the Panama trade agreement or Korea. Korea trade agreement would take the Korean tariff on our red meat from 40% to 0. That's kind of a good thing, I'd say. To allow our products to be almost 40% cheaper in Korea than they are now. Now, some would say, well, you know, we lose some other things, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if we don't engage on these trade agreements and get this done, they're going to continue to buy beef out of Australia and Argentina and Korea or other places as well. So we're losing market share by sitting and doing nothing, and but appeasing basically the AFL-CIO. Let me tell you that actually the trade unions in Colombia are in favor of the trade agreement with the U.S. They realize they can really benefit. It's the teachers union in Colombia that is putting the brakes on the bill in concert with the American AFL-CIO, the U.S. big union. So I witnessed that. I traveled with Leader